Hi there, welcome to another video from Revise the Right Way. In this video I'll be sharing some hints, tips and examples which should hopefully help you achieve a level 7 in your Language and Literature Paper 1. This video should work for both SL and HL students, but obviously any comparative parts should be ignored by SL students. Planning. Love it or hate it, if you want a 7 you have to make a meaningful plan in a short amount of time. My main point with any plan is to keep it as simple as possible, still makes sense to you an hour in when your brain is threatening to go on strike. Bullet points are okay, but my first focus with any plan is progression. How will I get from point A to point B and still cover all of my ideas, linking them where possible and looking to compare and contrast at HL. So refer to the big 5 and make it easy in your head to go from each point. Ideally, the end of each paragraph should link to the next paragraph, moving from idea to idea logically and systematically. No one wants to read a response that jumps around, so here's a suggestion for your planning. And I'll include an example on the screen for each part. The good news here is that a part of this response is where you get to think about cats. Well, cats with a list, because there are 2 S's at the end. So starting with content and theme, the main ideas of the text. Okay, then moving into audience and purpose. So when you're thinking about this, try to think about the authorial intent, including how it either subverts or reinforces the conventions of any given genre or purpose. With target audience, it's better to be specific and focus on what you do know rather than what you don't. Look for clues like how simple or difficult the language is. For instance, if it includes monosyllabic or polysyllabic language, or even semantic field being incorporated into the text. It's also worth pointing out that you can dispute the target audience. Does all of the text fit with the perceived purpose or audience? If not, why? Then move into tone and mood. Think about how the text makes you feel. Okay, what effect is being achieved throughout the text and how does the writer achieve this? Moving on from that, stylistic features. Think about how language is being used, the connotations and denotations of words. What do the words tell you? And then think about how this links back to tone and mood. As well as this, I also think you should think about whether it's directed at a certain person, whether it uses an extended metaphor, it uses subject-specific language. This might also be where you talk about things like semantic fields. And then finally, refer to structure. And simply put, this just means describe what you see and the effect it creates. If it uses short paragraphs, think about what that suggests or why parts of the text are laid out in a certain way. If you have time, link all of these back together in each point that you make, but try to follow a simple structure. Whatever part of the big 5 you're looking at, then the relevant technique, the effect that that has on the reader, and then making that link between the 2 texts. So some teachers will tell you to write about each text in different paragraphs, and that's a valid approach, but personally I prefer writing about the text together wherever possible, so that you A, avoid focusing too much on one text, and B, always explore each part of the big 5 in relation to both texts. It also helps you to manage your time. If you think about your journey here as your road to becoming a crazy cat person, gender neutral here. So each time you cover a section, it's kind of like you're adopting another cat and one step closer to being a weird person. By the end of the exam, you have 5 cats, no friends, and sometimes share food with the cats because, well, reasons. The 2 texts we'll focus on in this video are included in the description below, so if you want to follow along, I'll tell you when to pause the video, when to have a go at the planning stage, and when to attempt a full response. I'll also include a full exemplar that I've written, but remember that this exam by its nature is subjective, so it won't be a perfect answer. It'll just try to do the things you need to do in order to get a good grade. Okay, so let's have a look at the mark scheme. And obviously the first thing you probably notice here is that it's the HL mark scheme. It's looking specifically at the comparative element of this. But if you are an SL student, I just want you to think about the same ideas. You're still looking at the same cats. You're still looking at the effect on the audience, effect on the reader, and you're still trying to think about all these different areas, identifying the technique, thinking about the overall effect that's being created. So when you look at these, the most important thing to think about is really understanding the criterion. So A, first of all, is about understanding and comparison of the texts. Understanding going is a very vague term, but basically you're looking at the idea of how similar or different are these texts, what kind of purpose do they have? What are their relations to each other in terms of possible contexts? Maybe different audiences are clear through the language. So you're going to find that some of these criterions overlap. So when you're looking at vocab, when you're looking at stylistic features, which is criterion B, you should be looking at things which maybe demonstrate an understanding of criterion A, whilst also writing it in such a way that criterion C and D are also incorporated. So if you look at criterion B, it's all about stylistic features, language, structure, tone, technique, all of these ideas about how they construct meaning. One of the things that I really want to reinforce is do not retell the text. The examiner knows the text. They will read it. They don't need you to tell it to them, okay? They can buy a photocopier cheaper than you can rewrite all of those words. The point being, just come up with analysis, come up with the effect that it creates on the reader. This kind of comes into criterion C as well when you think about how organized, how coherent, how balanced, and this is why I'm saying if you include each text in each paragraph, it automatically is going to be balanced. And I think that's the biggest area where some people write too much for paper 1 and paper 2 about one of the texts. This is a really key thing. Balance your argument. And then finally, criterion D, we're looking at the specifics of the language, how clear, how varied, how accurate it is. And the point is, yes, we want to use fancy words, and yes, we want to use a range of language, but if it's not correct, if you're spewing words out like a thesaurus incorrectly, it kind of makes you sound like you're trying too hard. There are some exam hacks you can use, which I'll talk about later, which do allow you to use these kind of words, but I would just be cautious. If you're not sure what the word is, probably best not to use it, okay? Here again, it's things like the choice of register. Is it appropriate? Is it in the style that you would expect? And that can be something that you explore in the text itself. How appropriate is the original text register, style, and terminology that's used throughout? Okay, so we've had a little think about the way that you would approach this, the assessment that goes along with this. Now what I'd like you to do is to check out the links in the description below if you haven't already done so for text A and text B. Ignore the exemplar for now because I really want you to have a go at this first. And if you are going to have a go at this before looking at my notes, please pause the video now. And if you've chosen to ignore that, that's cool, that's fine. We're going to continue and you're going to have a little look at my notes here. Now, one of the things that I will say is my notes and my planning took around 5 minutes. Now, obviously, you could argue I knew the text already. So there's got to be 5 minutes of reading, 5 minutes of planning. There's no set length or set time, but this is what I would try to advise you to do. I just want to point out one thing as well, that when I was writing these, it was with the mind of, I want people to understand what my ideas are in the planning, but really, like I said before, the only person who needs to understand your plan is you. So use that time wisely. The reading time should be helping you to clarify which text you want to talk about, what you want to say, and then as soon as you can, getting those ideas into a plan. There isn't actually a set length for your paper 1. That's really important. Nobody that I've spoken to suggests that there is, but most people will suggest, and I think it makes sense, that if you write a side every 20 minutes, around 6 sides in length overall, that's realistically what a 6 or 7 candidate is going to do. In my example, I actually skip the introduction deliberately because people have this tendency to overwrite their introduction and then just repeat themselves. So I kind of wanted to avoid that, but if you're going to write an introduction, make it short, make it meaningful, and the same with the conclusion. Don't just repeat yourself, don't repeat the text. Come up with something that you haven't previously said that ties in your existing ideas. And like it says here, it's better to focus on what you know for sure. The idea is that you're not going to be able to say every single thing about these texts, so why focus on something that you don't know? And don't repeat yourself. There's a few examples that I've seen where people keep focusing on target audience, or they keep focusing on a certain idea. Yes, okay, it might be important in your mind, but it's not actually going to get you any marks if you keep repeating the same idea. And then on the next page, I just want to show you a few ideas that I have about exam hacks in general. There are certain phrases and ideas that I kind of like to use, and I think that they sound pretty effective. And basically, here are some ideas or phrases that you can lift and you can kind of turn into your own idea. When I say lift, I don't mean just take it word for word, but make it work for what you're writing. So here you'll see that there's the idea of the writer reinforcing or subverting expectations. Basically, does it do what you expect it to do? And subverts expectations is a fancy way of saying it doesn't do what you expect it to do. When you look at the conventions of this text type being adhered to, it means that if you look at this kind of text, it does what you expect it to. It's kind of similar to the first one, but it's said it in a different way. When you're looking at the juxtaposition, that's kind of the opposite of that. A specific semantic field is basically a fancy name for a group of words. So if you have a group of related words, you can refer to it as a specific semantic field. An extended metaphor you probably know, but you can see how I've written that there to try to sound a little bit more effective. When we talk about authorial intent, that can be different to reader conception. And when you look at that final idea, it's basically saying the ideas are similar to the central tone and mood of the piece, but it's saying it in a way that sounds a little bit more developed. Okay, so at this point, if you're interested in having a go at the whole analysis, like I've done in the exemplar, you should pause the video and have a go at that, ideally spending the whole amount of time that you would spend for the whole exam. Then what I'd like you to do is have a look at my example, see what you can see in there that it does effectively, and have a look at it in relation to the assessment criteria. If you're interested in a follow-up video which explores that, I'd be more than happy to do so. But one of the things that I want to make is a meaningful conclusion to this video, that all of the material that I produce for the Instagram, for the YouTube, is designed to help my students and any other students who are looking at this. So please, if you are interested in me exploring a text further or looking at how to do paper 1, paper 2, IOC, written task, then if you use the hashtag, that's going to help me to see what you're interested in. Or if you comment below, then I can see also what you think to this video and what you would like to see a bit more of. Thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed, please share this video and comment below.